every generation has had its moral blind spot, whether it's slavery, denied the vote, or anything like that. This is ours.
Today, I am with Robert Garza. He is the father of 8 children. He survived a brutal 16-year custody battle and over 43 false CPS allegations. Today, he leads the international movement for family court reform, transforming personal adversity into a mission that protects children and upholds parental rights around the world. Welcome, Robert. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me some of the most impactful life events that have shaped you as a father?
Having children first, that made me grow up very fast. And so there's nothing like having children. For people that never had them, you can't really describe what it's like to, put them to bed, to hug them, to teach them new things. It's just something you have to experience.
Now, you said you were very young when you had your first. What was that like?
It was good and bad because, I don't know when you started having kids, but if you have kids at an early age, it keeps you out of trouble and you have to give up a lot of the stuff that you normally would have done as a child or as a teenager or whatever. So, I focused on school. I actually went all through high school, and my senior year, you have like an elective. And so I dropped out of high school my senior year to start college just because I knew I couldn't be messing around.
And if you don't mind, how old were you when you had your first?
Young. My ex was 4 years older, so.
Wow. You would have to grow up.
I had to get married, put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And you're definitely right on, you either choose the responsibility and grow up fast, or you run from the responsibility. And it sounds like you chose to accept the responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
So when a lot of people are going through family court, depending on how small or how big they are, there's a transition period. And are you divorced or anything, or no? Okay, see, you wouldn't know anything about this. So when you're taking your kid, okay, here you go. So imagine your kid going to school and they don't want to go to school that day. You've had that problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's almost the same thing when you're trying to take them home to the other parent or whatever. They're just like, oh, I don't want to get up early. I don't want to do this. I don't do that. So same thing with coming back and forth. So there's always this transition period. So when they come and they're, in what, you haven't been around them for several days or whatever. So to kind of break the ice, and especially even more so with teenagers, because teenagers, you don't want to be around your parents. You want to go play, go be with your friends or something, or on your devices now, right? Your phones, tablets, whatever. Mine always have a lot of homework because they do all kinds of extra activities and whatever. So when they come over, I'm like, look, my daughter right now, I'm like, beat me at Uno, and then you can go up to your room, get on your devices, do your homework, whatever. And so now when she comes over, that's our icebreaker. And while we're sitting there playing Uno, we're actually talking and whatever. But it's actually, now she's looking forward to beating me at something. But when she beats me at Uno, she calls me old then. But, I'm like, that doesn't count. I meant physical. But it's a joke. But yeah. But yeah, so if you want to break icebreaker with your kids, if you have 2 households, that's an amazing one to do because it challenges them to something and makes them, interact. Mm-hmm. And as you're playing, even if, whatever's going on that day, then you hear about their day, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And they don't even realize what's going on. They're just going through it. Yeah.
Well, that's great advice for every parent, I think, who struggles sometimes with those teenage relationships where the teenager seems kind of closed up.
Yep. And
you're just trying to open them up a little bit and ask them questions. I can't tell you how many times I've asked one of my kids who's a teenager, how was your day? And that usually ends with the answer, fine, good, or good.
Yeah. All right.
Tell me a little bit more.
No, they don't want.
So I think that's good advice for any parent, who's start with a game, so a simple game, like you said, Uno or cards or some other thing like.
just beat me at this. And and you already know if they come to you and it's the weekend, you're like, okay, I know you already know they're going to ask to go out somewhere with their friends. Okay, as soon as you beat me, I know. Then they know already. So they go grab the deck and they're like, all right. And you're like, okay, what are you going to ask me? You want to go somewhere, but all right, let's do it. Yeah.
That's great. Now, you had mentioned, and we introduced you with this 16-year custody battle experience that you've had. That must have been a hard time. How did your faith journey intersect with that and take you from the beginning to where you are now?
Well, so I got divorced about 16 years ago, and my kids never knew a life outside of court. So from the time they were 1 and 3 all the way till now, one of my daughters has graduated. She's 18, 19, and then my youngest one's 16. So they'd never really known a life outside of family court, and it was very hard going through it, but God never gives you more than you can't handle, and I believe that firmly. And there's also a reason for what you're going through. You just have to find that purpose. So when I was going through it, I questioned everything, even my faith at some point, because I was just like, there's no way. Why would I be going through this when, I have other kids. I didn't go through what this was supposed to be the best time of my life, right? I'm older, now I can afford it. And before I knew it, I had a classic car museum. All those cars went to lawyers, started charging up credit cards. And so life got very hard. But at the end of it, I think I told you I went through like 43 silver bullets is what they call them, because it's false allegations. My ex never did it. She always did it by proxy, never came to court and said I did anything, just did it through mandatory reporters and stuff. So those are all done. But going through it, I asked God to not let this, think how I worded this, just don't let this all be for nothing. Like, why did I go through this if nobody can benefit from what I went through? Because it really devastated my whole family and even my kids. And be careful what you wish for, because when you do, He'll give it to you. Started with this bill, this time taking time back bill. And it went through Texas unanimous, bipartisan the first time, and the governor signed off on it on Father's Day, which is crazy. I got a call on Father's Day, and it was the senator's office. They're like, hey, Robert, the governor just signed off on your bill. And I was like, wow. They're like, yeah, happy Father's Day. The faith in what I went through is even more now, because I've seen what God can do with someone if you just concentrate and have a purpose and not let everything else distract you. And that's for anything, being a father, being a mother, being a husband, being a wife. Like, if you just concentrate on that, there's so many things that we have in our lives now with technology and whatever else that can distract you. I was able to write 500 bills now. That's 10 bills per state. And this is all God, all of it. There's no way I would have got through this. My wife is, we go to church all the time. Our faith is super strong, or else there's no way we could have got through this.
Can you describe to me, before we get into your experience with the 500 bills and the 47 shared parenting bills, describe to me your lowest point?
The lowest point was when I went through, we got divorced, me and my ex, and we filed for divorce. And it didn't cost like $500, maybe $1,000 to get divorced, because we were agreeable on everything. And there's a waiting period in Texas, and I think it's 30, 60 days, something like that. Is it 30 days? Oh, I can't remember, whatever it is in Texas. It was great. Like, I was like, wow, why? I was going over every morning, cooking breakfast for my kids. Like, I was like, why couldn't you be like this? I thought we're probably going to salvage things if it kept going like this. And the 30th day, you can't go back after assets. And that's why she was on such good behavior, because 30 days after, you can still go back after assets after you're divorced, and in Texas. And the 30th day, I had cops at my doors with protective orders, restraining orders. I didn't understand why. There was really no reason for it. And when they were telling me this stuff, I was like, there has to be some kind of mix up. Like, you go through all these emotions. You've never been divorced. So first of all, you're hurt in that. But then for someone to do this to you when everything was just fine, on top of it, it was very devastating. And to have, these alleged things of starving and dehydrating your kids, like, what are you talking about? Like, I would never do that. I have older kids and none of this has ever been an issue. But that's when I learned about false allegations, everything else. But the biggest point is my children thinking that I did something to hurt them or, like dehydrate them or starve them. Like that having my children think that I did something like that was probably like one of the lowest points of, that they would think that I would do something to hurt them. Of course they didn't, but I didn't know that at the time. I was in my own head. So.
Yeah, wow. That must have been pretty, surprising is not even a strong enough word, I think.
I mean, and now I can talk about it because, that's been so long ago and, they've all been ruled out and everything else. But going through each one, if you've never experienced a false allegation or anything like that, now they're rampant. If you're getting divorced, they pretty much start with false allegations to gain the upper hand in court. And so now it's pretty well known, but 16 years ago, it wasn't what it is today.
Thanks for sharing that. So this is what got you on the track to want to fix some of the injustices in the legal system related to child-parent relationships. Now, I want to acknowledge up front that the best situation is if a couple can work it out and stay together and raise their kids together. That's the best. That's the ideal situation. But that doesn't always happen for a million reasons. I saw some research just recently that said that even in that case, 50-50, even in the less than ideal case, 50-50 parenting is factually shown to be the best outcome for children. And so what you're doing to try and fix this seemingly systematic problem in the family court system, it really is about giving children the best opportunity to be loved by both parents. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work you're doing?
Yeah.
In that area?
So 50-50 parenting is the best solution all the way around. And if you have children, I truly believe that you should work it out until they're at least 18, unless you can't get along, then it's not going to be ideal for the kids. But if you think just the grass is greener on the other side and you're like, because they don't buy me this, buy me that, whatever, then that's not a good reason to get divorced. Now, if there's physical abuse, emotional abuse, stuff like that, absolutely. The stats on it are when custody falls below 10% to either parent, mom or dad, you put that child at risk for alcoholism, teen pregnancy, high school dropout, incarceration. That's with 10% less to either one. Standard possession today, which is every first, third, and fifth weekend and a weekend couple hour possession. Standard possession is 29% to one parent. Expanded standard is 39% to one parent. Both of those still put our children to being at risk. So the last 30 to 50 years, our courts have been sentencing our children to being at risk. That's why we're seeing all the issues that we're seeing with our children right now, because it's evolved over a couple of decades already and it's getting worse. The only way to right this is to start at 50-50. We're not saying that and when you talk about these shared parenting bills, shared parenting is you start at equality. That's why my bills are named a new start at equality. Right now, what happens is you start staggered. One starts here, one starts here, but that pins them against each other. But that's where the court system's making a bunch of money. Right now, we're just starting at equality. Now, if you think about it, this standard possession, and hopefully your viewers will understand this, especially if they're going through this, they can explain this to their attorneys and stuff, because a lot of people don't know this. Standard possession was a line that the legislature drew in the sand that said, judges, do not go below this line, which is standard possession. They said, you have all this discretion, but do not go below this line. Somehow, that line in the sand that was not meant to be crossed, it was never meant to be a ceiling or a starting point It meant to be the bottom of the barrel, and that's where standard possession came from.
Oh, so it was supposed to be a boundary, not a starting point. That's
And
very
that
interesting.
blows lawyers and judges' minds, because now that I've passed multiple bills in multiple states now, I can go in and teach lawyers and judges on the law because I drafted it. And I've taught these CLE classes. And when I tell them that, it blows their mind. Now, the crazy part is you can ask a judge right now, where do you start at if it's not at equality? Then they're not ready for that, because they're like, I don't know. Well, that's where it's the legislator's responsibility now to start at equality. We only have 7 states right now that have 50-50 parenting at the get-go. And that's not saying it's mandatory. It's saying that that's where the legislator says this is where you start at equality, and then you can go down from there. The rest of the states aren't like that because they're pinning these people against each other. The family court is a $60 billion industry. It makes more money than all other courts combined. That's not a lot of parents that are deadbeat parents or domestic violence parents or anything else. That's a lot of parents that want to be in their children's life, or it wouldn't be that high.
Yeah, right, because they're the ones paying for the court system
Correct.
to keep going, right? So someone's shelling out money to keep going back to court.
Yep, because they want to be in their children's life. Now, you cannot have a strong nation without strong families.
No, you can't.
50-50 parenting ensures that our nation stays strong. And then the next 2 years, I always say this, that this is the biggest civil rights movement since the civil rights. This affects every man, woman, child, race, color, creed. Hopefully in the next 2 years, all 50 states will be a new start at equality.
Well, and I think at least, having that start at 50-50,
Presumption.
at least it diminishes the negative impacts of a broken parent relationship, right? It's like, okay, it's not ideal that the marriage or the partnership fell to pieces, but the impact on the child, they talk about how children who come from divorced households are X% more likely to also then do the same things. And, that's probably unhelpful for the most part, but that there's a large number of people who it truly is about being able to have a real and meaningful relationship with their children without the court interfering in that.
Right. And all it takes is one person to file. I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but it's going to blow your people's minds. That a divorce is the only lawsuit that you can file that you're going to win as soon as it's filed. It's always granted. It's a lawsuit. So imagine suing, and it's a suit. You sue someone. You're suing someone for a divorce. And so it is the only lawsuit that you can file that when it's filed, you automatically won.
Wow.
Because it will be granted.
Yeah, that's a real shame, right? Because the court should be protecting its citizenry, not encouraging them to destroy their family relationships.
Yep. In fact, it's called a no-fault divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And Ronald Reagan, do you know the history kind of?
No, can you tell us the history of no-fault divorce?
It'll make sense once I do this. So Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, and he wasn't married to Nancy Reagan. He was married to someone else. And she wanted to get divorced. So she tried to get divorced, and the judge was like, no, you said for better or for worse, go. Like, no. Back then, in the 70s, it was for better or for worse. Well, until they did that to Ronald Reagan, and he was a great actor, and everyone loved him, and became president later. Right then, when he was governor, she still wanted to get divorced, so she made a false allegation against him. It almost ruined everything he had because of that false allegation. So he went through it, and he said, you know what? I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make no-fault divorce. That way, nobody else has to go through this. And when he did, it ran through all 50 states almost within 2 years. Then you saw an influx of all these people getting divorced because all these women started filing for divorce. The problem was that the system couldn't handle it. And so the federal government, all these women started going on Section 8 housing, food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare. And so what the government did, the federal government, to stop this bleeding is that they incentivize the states with the Title 4D funds. And I'm sure you talked about that before. So this Title 4D funding was to incentivize the states to get paid back for the people that were on the government funding, which is Section 8 housing and food stamps. What it does was they did child support. And when the states would collect that child support, it made you could only be on government housing and funding if you made like less than $20,000 back then. So with that extra child support was only made not for the women or the children. It was made to pay the government back by keeping people off of welfare. With that extra money, it put them over. So the only way that you would be put on child support back then was if you were on government funding or at the risk of being on government funding. That was the only two ways. Over time, the state saw how much money they could get reimbursed for collecting this, and now everyone gets on child support because of that reimbursement. But it was only made if you were at the risk of being on welfare or on welfare.
So does child support, I thought child support went directly to the other person, does it not?
It does. When, let's just say you and your wife are divorced and you have to pay $1,000. So you pay $1,000 to the Texas Attorney General. They collect that $1,000. They send the $1,000 directly to your ex. They get reimbursed by the federal government for collecting that money, and they get 66% for every dollar collected. So when you send your money in, they make $660 check just off of you sending that $1,000 for reimbursement of what they've spent.
Wow. Talk about the wrong kind of incentive.
Yep. And so about a couple of months ago, I went to Washington, D.C., and me and some people went up there, and I made a bill to untie that child support incentivization from judges are the ones that are putting you on this child support. So without killing Title 4D, I untied it from child support and tied it to court compliance. The more the court complies with 50-50 custody, with their orders or whatever else, then it incentivizes the other direction instead of weaponizing it. So untie it from child support, tie it to court compliance. And that still gives the state money, but it stops the weaponization.
So what's the likelihood of that passing?
Well, that's on a federal level. There's too much money coming in from the states for that. You have to take it away in bits and pieces. And so that's why I didn't want to take it away. I wanted to disincentivize the weaponization of it and tie it to something else. So you have to think outside the box when you're doing these. Like I said, I've written so many bills now that I understand how to change the system with little tweaks to make the court system for the people, by the people, instead of the government doing this. Because child support was never made, like I said, for the children and families. It was made to pay the state back. That was its sole purpose.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you mentioned this particular issue as one of moral significance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the moral blind spot. So slavery was once illegal. Women were denied the vote. There's so many things in history that we look back on and we're like, wow, like, why did we have slavery? And it was in a speech that I did in Pennsylvania for shared parenting at the Capitol. And I tied now what we're going through is basically that. Every generation has had its moral blind spot, whether it's slavery, denied the vote, or anything like that. This is ours. And it's us not starting at equality when two fit, willing, and able parents divorce. We're pinning them against each other, and it's destroying our nation at a rate that I don't think they understand yet. But we're going to look back on history and see that this too was our moral blind spot.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you're saying is that the federal government and state governments are intentionally, well, or unintentionally maybe. I guess I don't know what it is now. Is it intentional, unintentional?
It's intentional.
Okay. I'll take your word for it for now.
Yeah.
They're intentionally, or they're incentivized, maybe is a better word. They're incentivized to pull families apart and make those relationships more difficult and more complex than they need to be.
So I think people...
Or destroy parent-child relationships.
So everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. The courts are convinced they're doing the right thing because they're putting people on child support to help the women and children. For the most part, so they feel like they're doing that. They don't understand that money, where it's going, how it's working in the background, but the government knows that it's reimbursement. The Attorney General's office knows what's going on. I think because of social media now, the awareness is getting out. It's very hard to hide now, and especially with people doing reels about this, and then it's starting to get well known now. Now they can't hide it. Now they have to do something about it. But until then, it's been hidden this long. And so just like me explaining kind of where it came from, that makes sense rather than just saying, oh, it's always just for the kids or whatever on child support. But I think everyone thinks they're doing the right thing, but they're not. And that's their blind spot. You have these legislators asking lawyers and judges about the law. And I made an image that, it's like, why would you go ask ExxonMobil if it's okay, should we okay this pipeline? And you're asking the company that wants to put the pipeline there. Like they're incentivizing it, or the tobacco companies to regulate their own selves. Mm-hmm. You're asking the family court to regulate themselves when you're asking them about these bills. I just had a bill in Idaho. It was my time taken, time back bill. They're so scared of it because when you return the child, you shall return the time. Disincentivizes making a false allegation. He had I think it was about 70 attorneys sign this petition to not have this bill go through in Idaho because they knew they won't be making any more money because most of this fighting starts with a false allegation or you interfere with someone's child custody. You stop both of those, it's like throwing a stick in the spoke. The wheel stops spinning. There is no more money generator there. Those are the two things that cause that money generation. I have two bills that will stop both of those.
It does seem like there's a lot of money for people to be incentivized in the wrong way in divorce court.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing to think that there's people who are excited about divorces happening.
Yeah. Remember I told you I did the continuing law education for judges and lawyers. So I went to one in Austin that I was invited to be a speaker. And I went the day before. And so I went to dinner with some law lawyers and some judges. And we're sitting at a table. And there was a guy across from me. And he was a lawyer. And I was there because I just passed the time taken, time back bill. And he goes, well, what else do you have in stock? And I was like, well, I have another one that I'm thinking about, and it's interference with child custody. He was like, tell me about it. So I did. It's whenever you call the cops will come out. They'll give a $500 fine the first and second time. The third time, they'll get arrested because it's a felony right now the first time, but I'm amending that to be 2 misdemeanors before the felony. And he goes, yeah, I don't like that one. And I was like, really? Why? He was like, that's my bread and butter. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, that's where we make all of our money because that's where this starts. After that, it's on. Then here comes the restraining orders, protective orders, enforcement actions, blah, blah, blah. He goes, if you stop that, you're stopping our money. I was like, wow, I can't believe you said that, first of all.
Right.
And I was like, okay. Next day, I didn't know this, but the owner of that law firm was sitting next to him, heard it, fired him, and said, we don't hire attorneys like that. And so kudos to the law firm. And I'm really good friends now with the law firm because of that. I didn't say anything to him. He overheard him and fired him anyway.
Wow. But yeah, man, that's the underlying incentive that there's probably a lot of lawyers who don't say it out loud, but who think and know that's true.
There's 70 on a petition right now in Idaho. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What's one last piece of advice you would give dads who are, one, either considering divorce or dads who are in the middle of this? How can they prepare themselves? How can they jump in and help? How can they maintain the relationship with the kids?
Yeah. So if you're still in a marriage and you can salvage it, absolutely, unless there's, like I said, it's not good for the kid to see domestic violence or, things like that. Now, if you have just problems, then it's good for the kid to see conflict and resolution, not to the point that you're, calling cops and everything else. You have to love your child more than you hate your ex. That's the biggest one that I can tell you. Whether you stay, well, it'd be your ex, so you already left, but you have to love your child more than you hate your ex. And always put them first. I don't know if I guess I didn't explain in this podcast, but I spent about $700,000 just being able to be in my children's life. I have joint custody. I have my kids. They weren't able to take them from me this whole time in 16 years. I'm pro se. I had to learn criminal law, civil law, constitutional law just to be able to be a father in my children's life. It shouldn't be that hard in Texas. It shouldn't be that hard anywhere. So if you have the chance to not go through that and stay until that child's at least 18, that is your parental responsibility to do that. I can tell you that if you do get divorced...
I would love to see those men jump into the marriage and try and resolve it, and try and make the most of the life that God's given them, right? It's like the best case scenario is you learn how to love your wife and vice versa. And you go to a counselor, go to a pastor, go to somebody to help you. And gosh, pray to God, ask him to change you, to see your life right, to see your spouse right. So that's my wish for everybody, because I don't want anybody to have to experience all that. It's so painful.
Yeah. You have to humble yourself for sure. Always date your wife. She's your girlfriend, your wife. She's everything, right? So I think a lot of people forget that. My wife, I leave flowers on her and my daughters. Every time my daughter goes to school, she'll find an orchid on her windshield. Every day before she goes to school, she'll find, dandelions or a magnolia or anything. And so hopefully one day she'll always remember that. But my wife too. I've never stopped dating my wife. Now think about this. I was married, got divorced for the last 16 years, but I've been married for 12. So don't be scared because it didn't work out between you and someone else. And remember, whoever you date has to love your child. I dated my wife for over a year just to make sure that, she had a daughter also. That was one of my 8. And so you have to make sure that you're not putting your kids in another situation. So don't just jump from one relationship to another, because that could even hurt the children even more. I think just love your kids. If you make a mistake, tell them you're sorry. Tell your wife you're sorry. Pray to God that, you can be the best wife or man, in that relationship, and to give you the strength for it, because you're going to be low sometimes, you're going to be high sometimes, and, you're going to need each other no matter what you're going through or how strong you are.
For men who their relationship is done and they're in the middle of trying to figure out what to do with their parent and child relationship and how to save as much of that as possible, how do they reach out to you? How do they learn more about what to do? How can they participate?
Yeah. So I've written bills, about 10 bills per state, and all of it's free. I don't charge for membership or anything. You can go to robertgarza.us, so www.robertgarza.us. And basically we have free Zoom meetings. I have probably the only one that I know of. So I teach legislation on Monday and Wednesdays. It's all free. And we go over the bills and how to get them in your states. But on Tuesday evenings, we have a therapist that comes in that does a support group, and it's free for everybody to come in. Invite however many people you want, but it's other people that went through the same things that you have went through, false allegations, alienation, all those things. And, all that's free, but that's And then you can go to my Facebook page, Robert Garza, and you can follow. I put stuff all the time that you can share. Yeah, there's just so much stuff that you can benefit from just being on the page. I don't post a lot of personal stuff. Usually every once in a while, I'll post something that me and my wife dated or my kids and I went out somewhere. But for the most part, it's mostly nuggets for people going through this, because I wish someone would have done that for me when I was going through this.
That's fantastic. What are you most excited about coming up here in the future with the legislation? What's the thing that really gets your gears pumped?
Well, right now, we have about 25 bills in multiple states. So a lot of these bills are going through your legislature right now in multiple states. And so I spend all my days testifying. Today was in Idaho. The last couple of weeks, I've been in 3 different states every week testifying on multiple bills. So the advocates are doing a great job. I always say you want to turn your pain into policy, and this is the way to make change. Going after your ex isn't going to affect anything. It may affect you, a vendetta, whatever, but don't do that. Like when let me tell you a story real quick. So even going through the 16 years of this, my daughter, during Easter, I had her. We went to church, went to eat lunch, and she was like, "Hey, Dad, my mom's having some people over her house, some friends. Can I go over?" I'm like, "Absolutely, go ahead." I was talking to a friend of mine after that, and he goes, "Why would you let your daughter go to your ex's on your time knowing what she did to you?" I'm like, "Well, what would I have done had my ex not done what she did?" And that's how I parent. I don't hold anything like that. I still parent as if my parent was a co-parent instead of a parallel parent. If they choose to parent like that, which they do, I don't do any of that. So I dropped the rope.
You've forgiven her.
Yeah. I mean, I forgave her a long time ago. Usually when somebody's like that, it's more about them than it is you. It's something inside of them, and there's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is control yourself. When you try to control someone else, that's when things go really wrong.
It's awesome. Well, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, here at Father and Friend, we care about families. We care about families staying as intact as they possibly can. And we know that complicated relationships happen, but that the most glorifying thing to God and the best thing for children and parents is to stay together if possible. And so if you're struggling with something out there related to shared parenting, connect with Robert and he will help you out and figure out what the best thing for you to do moving forward is. Appreciate it, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
Fellow fathers and friends, so glad you could join us for this episode. To stay connected, visit our website at fatherandfriend.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media sites. Until our next episode, keep showing up, loving deeply, and making an impact for the good of your family. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Father and Friend.